Welcome to How to Be a Better DM. I'm your host, Cayden, and today we're going to be talking about some of my experiences as a dungeon master and the biggest lessons I've learned over this last year as I decided to start running campaigns for my friends and family. The learning curve has been huge, to say the least, so let's get into it. So lesson number 1, I learned how to shut up. And that sounds funny, but I promise I have a point. When I first started DMing, any moment of silence just left me sweating. I was, constantly wondering, was anybody actually engaged? Was I giving them enough to go on? Or is everyone just confused and wondering why we're running my campaign? Those are just a few of the many thoughts that I would have race through my head whenever we had a pause in play or choices by the players. As I became more confident and comfortable in the stories I was telling, and just time progressed, I started allowing the players to really dictate their own experiences. I learned to just shut up and let them think. Silence is actually a great thing. Have you ever been eating dinner and heard someone say, "Well, it must be good because no one's talking"? Yeah, I think it's very similar to my experience playing D&D. We as humans need time to think, and it's a totally normal thing to pause and think, how would my character react to this, or what would I actually say in this situation? I learned that the more I kept quiet and resisted the urge to fill in those gaps, my players jumped at the opportunity to fill it in themselves. Maybe not jumped, but they would eventually fill it in. Sometimes with the most excellent role-playing I've ever been a part of. And I always think, man, I was so close to ruining that moment just because I was stressed about it. The silence also pushes your players to think more creatively and be an active participant in this group storytelling experience. In my opinion, D&D should be extremely collaborative, and the more the players are spouting stuff off, and telling us what they're imagining, our job as a dungeon master gets so much easier, and it's so much more fun to play off of that. You feel like you are a part of this player group. You're a part of the party, even though you're running the story. So in summary, just let the silence go. See what happens. If you find that your games get cooler, definitely send us a message on Instagram and tell us that this tip helped you. Second lesson that I learned is that I have certain strengths and I have certain weaknesses, and that's okay. So this one may seem like an obvious lesson. It is something that we all learn time and time again, just as we progress through life, as we go through hard experiences. We fail and we succeed, and then we repeat. Here's the thing. D&D is super vulnerable. Let's call it what it is. It's make-believe, right? Often we're meeting up with a bunch of friends, family, or strangers, and we're expected to pretend to be a different person with abnormal abilities, and use our imagination to watch epic displays of magic and heroism. As adults, we generally gain so much awareness and ego that we forget how to just have fun and how freeing it can be to play pretend. In being vulnerable, we expose our strengths and our weaknesses equally. And as the DM who's expected to run this imaginary game, that can be super scary. Just like everything else in life, the best way to learn self-acceptance is to face it head on and embrace reality. As I started DMing, I realized that, I'm really bad at coming up with accents and unique voices for NPCs. I can hear how they, I want them to sound in my head, but when it comes to actually implementing them, I just don't do a very good job. I feel like I do a pretty good old man or an extremely pompous Brit, but beyond that, it's super, super difficult for me. You'll notice if you listen to our other podcast, The Pact and Boon, that Elon, my character, is spoken in my own voice. He's definitely a different character than I am, but I couldn't come up with anything that I liked for him, mostly due to my own limitations with accents and altering my voice. At the same time, I've found that I have a streak for the dramatic, and I think that my storytelling ability is great. I'm able to create a game in many ways that is great, and so my shortcomings aren't the biggest deal in the world. I don't think that if you talk to my players, they would actually notice even that, maybe my accents are a shortcoming, because I'm at least trying, and I'm also making up for it in a lot of other ways. So the big takeaway from this is that it's okay to be bad at things, and that shouldn't be a reason that you don't do something, because you're good at other things. And as you continue to try, you will get better on all counts. Everyone has to start somewhere, so just give yourself some grace and give it a shot. Okay, and the third and final lesson that I'm going to talk about in today's episode is don't let the rules ruin your game. Don't be afraid to improvise. So I have never been one for rules, and yet this was still something that I had to get comfortable with running my games, because it's really, really easy just to rely on the dice and let that kind of take over. And I think that there are a lot of times when that makes sense. It's fun. It honestly lends to more opportunities to improv when you are just letting the dice dictate things. But sometimes the dice say one thing, and that one thing isn't what you want to come to pass, or isn't what should come to pass. I am somewhat of maybe what you'd say a chaotic good dungeon master. I want my players to have fun, and I want the story to be rich, but how I get there is through a whole lot of planning, and then throwing all that planning out the window when I get a crazy idea. So I'm just very top of mind. There have been times as a DM that I have derailed an entire storyline due to a last-second idea that I had just to make things more interesting. I'll totally BS a roll and throw my players into complete chaos. Just last week, I was running a game in a corrupted forest where a villain named the Hangman was targeting one of my PCs. It was actually Justin, one of my fellow co-hosts on How to Be a Better DM. The Hangman was targeting him as a sort of assassin. The Hangman ended up shooting a crow that had landed on a tree with a longbow, and it triggered the forest to come alive and attack all the other PCs, so I could do a little 1v1 with this player. And it's just funny because most of that, wasn't a part of the plan. It was just like, it'd be a lot more interesting if this was a little 1v1 instead of all of these players attacking this one bad guy, which was originally the plan. I also at some point decided it would be super interesting if if after the Hangman won, because inevitably he was going to win because he's so much stronger, he grabbed Justin's character's unconscious body and started riding off on a spectral horse that he had hidden in the brush. When I planned this session, the Hangman didn't have a horse. He had no intention of keeping Justin's character alive, and he was going to take on the whole party, like I said. But that just, to me, at the moment, just sounded boring, and I was like, I'm going to try something else, and I decided to go for it. So yeah, as sometimes just like as I'm setting up for games and ideas pop into my head, I give it very little thought, and I just implement them and see what happens. It's almost like I'm rolling my own internal dice and just letting whatever happens. My players afterward, just to kind of affirm this idea, told me that it was one of the best sessions that we had to date, which felt really great knowing that I had switched things up during the session and that I had improvised a lot of things. It lends to it helped me realize, like, okay, I'm doing the right things. I feel good about my ability to do this. And there you have it for today. So thanks for tuning into How to Be a Better DM. Again, I'm your host, Cayden Otley, and until next time, shut up accept yourself where you're at and stop being such a stickler for the rules.
Thanks again for listening to our show. If you like our content and would like to engage with more of it, head over to our Instagram account at HowToBeABetterDM and give us a follow. Make sure to watch some of our Dungeon Master rules videos while you're there to give yourself some more structure and procedure as a Dungeon Master. Also, don't forget to reach out with a DM and we can talk shop and I can get to know you a little bit better. Thanks again for listening.